بدأت الحكاية منذ مئات السنين بين القبائل العربية في صحراء الجزيرة القاحلة، عندما تولد عشق بين الجواد والفارس. ورغم كل الظروف القاسية استمرت شعلة التلاحم بينهم حتى يومنا هذا. وقد حظيت الخيل العربية على مر السنين برعاية إلهية سخر فيها العديد من عشاق الخيل الذين حافظوا على هذا الإرث العتيق جيلا بعد جيل من المشرق إلى المغرب.
Welcome to Beit al-Arab and welcome to Kuwait. Now it's slowly becoming your second home, I guess. Judy, we'll start this interview today with the subject regarding the Egyptian Arabian horses, how they were in the past. How you were fortunate enough to see all the foundation horses in Egypt. How were horses in the past compared to the horses of today, being 6, 7, 8, some of them even 9 generations away?
You know, it seems so long ago. I mean, because the first horses we saw were in 1959, and at the time, General von Zantner, who was the manager of the stud for the last 10 years, from I think 48 or 49 until 58 or 59. It was about a 10-year period. He had culled all of the horses, and just down to the best, including the Inchas horses, which had been moved over from after Nasser became the head of Egypt, and the royals were out. So von Zantner had all the Inchas horses there that he had selected from, including some that she eventually culled. And of course they were, along with the Royal Agricultural Society mares, the great horses. So we were fortunate to be able to see a wide variety of the Inchas as well as the Royal Agricultural Society, which became the EAO, those horses.
And that was which year?
That was 59. 1959. So it's it's been a long time ago, and there's been remarkable change and remarkable progress, because at that time there were a very limited number of horses. And today we have many, many generations descending from those great old foundation mares. It's hard for me to believe that many of the breeders today have never seen those truly great horses that were the foundation of what they're breeding from today.
Yes.
So, as far as the difference is concerned,
I mean, what are the differences? I mean, are they still carrying the same traits?
Well, there are subtle differences, but there were subtle differences between the families in those days too. For example, the Bukra family, which was the Sabah, versus the Moniad El Nafus family, which was the Siklawi, going back to Dalal. You had Maisa, which was the old Bint el Bahrain, which was different again. And in later years, the Abayan family became very popular, although there wasn't very much of it then, other than, I believe it was the Inchas Mona. Of course, there were a lot of the Rodans. There were the Riala branch and the Risala branch. So today, I mean, the same families exist, but and still have some different traits. I would say that overall, the consistency and the quality today, of course, there's more to choose from, but you can still see the differences, but the consistency and the quality is considerably higher or more frequently maintained because of the succeeding generations. And then again, through those breeders that have selected wisely. So have I answered that question?
Yes, you sure did. I mean, can we say, would it be fair to say the horses of today are more correct, better looking, typier than the horses of yesterday?
I would say that there's more consistency in the quality. And I've seen that gradually increasing over the years with each generation. They're different. There's differences, but there's still similarities. I don't see Ammoniat el Nafus, for example, anywhere. Anymore.
So can we say we are certain things we are losing?
I wouldn't say it's lost. I think it's there. Occasionally you see certain traits come out that are very close. For example, Old Bukra and Bin Bukra, that family in particular, you still see certain traits when it's reinforced.
Yes.
But in many cases today, there has been such a clamor for a particular strain or a particular family, and unless there is inbreeding or line breeding to those old horses, and then again type relates to color.
Yes.
Today you see far more grays, where in those days, for example, the Ammoniat family was all chestnut.
Yes.
Her grays were different from her chestnuts. The Bukra family, you see mostly in grays. As a matter of fact, the majority of Arabian horses or Egyptian Arabian horses you see today are gray, which there again, I believe, and I remember Jimmy Dean, who was one of the famous breeders in the United States who had raffles on some of the early Arabian horses. He always felt the type related to the gray gene, to the gray horse. I have to say I kind of believe that.
Yeah, the gray horse tends to be more prettier than a black horse.
Well, it was very interesting to me when I was reading all of Lady Anne Blunt's notes at the British Library, which Rosemary Archer eventually published in a book, but I don't remember if she published that because there were certain notes that I'm sure she probably either didn't include or might have missed because there were a lot of them. But I remember somewhere reading that Lady Anne Blunt was very concerned because at that time, Lady Wentworth was only breeding color to color to color to color. And you see the difference in the cravat horses from the old Egyptian horses that Lady Anne Blunt had. Finally, Lady Wentworth introduced Skoronic, which was gray. Changed the type. Changed the type remarkably.
Sure.
So I've often thought that if you, and you see this a lot in the internationally bred horses where there's some Egyptian blood, but mostly Polish and old cravat and Spanish and what have you. Constant breeding of color to color. Bays, chestnuts, much fewer whites. And a different type.
Yes.
And you see a different type in the colored Egyptian horses too.
It's true.
So all these things have a bearing on genetics as well as the type that's consistent that we have today.
What horse would you bring from the past? If today I would say recommend me one old horse that can fit today in my breeding program. I mean, I know horses are far apart. Sometimes what we call it, the horse, it's an old generation.
Of course, it depends on what you want.
Yes.
What you feel that you need.
But what horse would fit on and on and on until today, probably? Would Nazir fit today?
Well, Nazir would fit, of course, because Nazir let the mares shine through. And if you're trying to change something, he probably would not change what it was that you were wanting to change or maybe improve on. But, you know, all the Nazi, no matter what Nazir was bred to, there was something that came through the mares, but still had the essence, some special essence which he gave. I think as far as consistency, you know, some of the old stallions bred better daughters than they did sons. So it's hard to say what would work. Halim Shah, of course, produced both stallions and mares. So to me, he's a stallion. If he fits in a program, or if he would fit in a program, he would be a consistent game changer.
Yes.
And gray.
And gray, yeah.
You wouldn't get going.
Gray is an issue, it's true.
But, you know, finding really good stallions that are consistent breeders in producing both sons and daughters, it's really hard. And sometimes, you know, everybody wants the one stallion that's going to breed everything. There's very few of those. You have to have individual stallions that will work with certain mares.
Well, that's the way it was historically. I mean, Sheikh al-Arab always produced nice daughters. Nazir did both, and they mixed very well.
Ibn Rabdan.
Yes, Ibn Rabdan.
Old Ibn Rabdan.
Yes.
Again, a different type. You know, really good stallions are still a problem. I think they always will be.
Yes. Was it there in the past also the same? Was finding a very good stallion a difficult thing to find also?
Well, I think the Nazir sons, many of the Nazir sons, not all, but many, turned out to be good breeding horses,
yes,
as well as his daughters.
Yes.
But if you look at the old stallions, El-Din produced mares better than sons.
Yes.
El Sariya had one son, which was Tahamos.
Yes.
No others. You don't find any other sons in this stud book.
Yes.
His daughters were lovely.
Yes.
Let's see, what were some of the other? I think Galal. I guess he did both. I don't remember his that well. He did have some.
And sometimes it looks like if the stallion is a female producer, and if he produces a good son, his good son does not carry on for some reason.
Well, I think you can look at Fala and his full brother.
Yes.
Didn't.
Yeah.
And they were both, I think they were both, were they Al-Din sons?
Fala has Al-Din. Which full brother?
He was gray. He was also imported to the States. Beautiful. Very fine, very refined. Rashik?
I
think it was Rashik. And Antar was another one, you know. I mean, his daughters he produced some really good daughters. Sons.
Did not work.
Sama, same thing.
Yes. So in a way, that's normal.
I guess you would say so.
Yeah.
So when you hit one that'll do both, you hit the jackpot.
Yeah. Yes, that's true.
You know, Ibn Halima, Halim Shah.
Halim Shah, yes.
Hijazi.
Yes. When you were saying earlier that Van Zander culled some of the horses, can you a little bit?
You mean cull? Right,
yes.
The word cull means to. When he came, he took. Of course, he looked over all the horses that were there, and he chose or selected what he considered were the best breeding stock, especially in relationship to the Inchas horses, because that was a whole herd, a big herd, and it had far more desert-bred horses and gifts to the king and different bloodlines and so on, and the consistency of the quality and in the bloodlines was not there in comparison to the old EAO horses, which he basically had come to oversee before the revolution. So all these other horses were brought from Inchas to Einshams, and they were some he put in paddocks by themselves, some were over a very fine old farm just across, kind of very nearby, the El Zara farm. So we saw both of the farms, and at that time he had still not completely reduced the Inchas herd back to what he wanted. Maybe so, I don't know, because he was not there when we got there. We'd missed him by 2 weeks. So
You never met him?
never met him. Never met him.
Did not contact him later on?
No, Richard Pritzlaff was a good friend of his.
Yes.
And I think, as I've written in some of my books, von Zantner, having reduced the Royal Agricultural Society EAO horses to the breeding stock that he wanted to carry on with, because he did not know he was going to be leaving. They asked him to leave.
After the revolution?
After the revolution, he was a foreigner, and they wanted to bring in a natives, and they brought in Dr. Marsafi. But Pritzlaff had met him.
Yes.
And he had gotten several, I think 4 mares and a stallion. Well, von Zantner was there. And he kept correspondence with von Zantner. They were both German descent. And von Zantner wrote to him later and said, if I had been there, I would never have sold the Forbises those 3 yearlings that they chose. So
good thing he wasn't.
Really, I mean,
it's a point of view. It's a point of view.
I have to say, and I'm not trying to be critical, but the horses that Pritzlaff got, with the exception of Moniet on the Foos, were nowhere near the quality that we were able to select, and including Rashad.
So you mean yours were better?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Except he did let him have Bint Moniet, which unfortunately, in my opinion, Pritzlaff.
She was not bred correctly.
She was not.
Yeah,
bred
she did not get a fair chance.
She didn't have a fair chance. I would have died to breed her to Ibn Halima or Ibn Sinan. He would not do it. He kept breeding her to Rashid.
Oh.
I think he did breed her to one of his other stallions, and she had a very pretty mare, filly.
Also a beautiful mare, this Bint Moniet.
Very. Now, she was very much the Moniet type, and she was chestnut.
Yes, interesting.
Yeah. There was a very pretty gray that was by, I believe she was Nazir and Moniet. And I wanted to buy her, but Don said, if you're going to buy Bint Mabruka, it's the same family, we need to get something different. She hung herself later on a rope.
How?
I guess the halter or something.
Ah.
I guess she wanted to go to the States, and it was a shame. She was a lovely filly.
The time you went there to Egypt, how many horses can you recall there were in Al-Zahra, almost?
Oh, I can't remember. There was the paddock for the Inchas horses. There was the paddock for the mares. There was the big paddock for the EAO mares. Then there was the colts, the fillies, the yearlings, that is, and the weanlings. And then the stallions were in the stallion barns. I don't know. Nowhere near what's there today.
100 probably?
Maybe 100.
Maybe 100 horses. So that's in 59. What led you to Al-Zahra? To go there? Before that, you started you were in Turkey first, right?
We were in Turkey, and we'd spent a lot of time studying the different horses and strains among the Bedouins that were still in Syria and in the southern part of Turkey where we lived along the border. And we went to all of the German, the Turkish stud farms. They had, I think it was 4 or 5.
Non-Arab?
No, all Arab.
All Arab?
All breeding Arabs, as well as thoroughbreds. But no, there was Eskişehir and Shukurova and Malatya and El-Aziz. I think it was El-Aziz. No, there's another. I can't remember all the names.
Yes.
Konya. And so we had a pretty good idea of what we had in our mind's eye of what we wanted, and we corresponded. I started writing to all the breeders that I could think of that we'd seen in advertising in the magazines, like Basie Tankersley, and of course Lady Wentworth had passed, but I wrote to Charles Craver with Davenport, and Lady Wentworth's, who was it that inherited? I can't remember his name. Anyway, I still have the letters of different farms I wrote to. And then also to Carl Raswan.
Oh, yes.
So Raswan was the one that we really kept up the correspondence with, and I still have all the letters that we wrote back and forth, and he was very interested in what we had seen in the desert and so on, but he said, you need to go to Egypt.
And he has been to Egypt.
He had been to Egypt,
Yes,
of course,
yes.
because he wrote several of the books, his
Yes.
books, Drinkers of the Wind, The Arab Horse, Escape to Baghdad, and so forth. But he loved the Egyptian horses and had extreme experience with them, and had also been in touch with von Zantner. I think he met him. And of course he knew Pritzlaff really well. So he
Yeah.
knew what was in Egypt at that time when we were going to go. And he said, he was the one that said, go there, go to El Zara. So we did. So it was truly Raswan that, if it hadn't been for him, I don't know that we ever would have gone there.
But all the survey that you did of the area, Turkey and Iran and so forth, this you did before Egypt?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Well, we did Iran later,
After Egypt?
after Egypt.
Okay.
But no, we did, up and down the coast, Beirut, Lebanon, Syria. Don had been in Saudi Arabia. But we spent a lot of time up and down that area.
And when you went to Egypt, you just bought the horses at the same time, or went back again and bought the horses?
No, we bought them at that time.
At the same time. At the same time.
And I have to say, we didn't know a lot as far as the Egyptian bloodlines were concerned, but we had enough experience with the different horses that we'd already seen and the strains and the families that when you saw something that was really good, it wasn't...
So this was my question. I mean, how would somebody who doesn't have experience in Arabian horses as much can buy such good horses that can establish a very good farm? I mean, how did it happen to you?
Well, we studied. We spent a lot of time studying. It didn't come just out of the blue because we also read. I bought a lot of books. While I was living in Turkey, we were out in God's country, and there wasn't much to do. So other than traveling to see the farms, and while Don was working, I bought as many books as I could get, and particularly studied art. I love to study the pictures of Arabian horses. And so that also began to influence that we were not seeing what the artists saw in these horses that we were looking at in Turkey and Syria and so forth. Once in a while you'd see one. Once in a while you'd see something special, but never consistency. And of course, I started writing at the time to make notes and wrote the book Hoofbeats Along the Tigris, which was because we owned our own Arabian horses there and raced and so forth. So we were horsemen. It's not like we were just, saw something pretty that we wanted, and we had been horsemen all our lives. But when you see something special, it's like a beautiful diamond on a piece of velvet,
Yes.
as opposed to a piece of glass on the floor.
Yes.
There's a
You
big
can
difference.
tell.
You can tell. It doesn't
can
take
tell,
a rocket scientist to tell.
You can tell.
So that, when we got to Egypt and we saw those horses, it was just, finally, after looking at all these horses everywhere,
There was distinction.
there was a huge distinction.
Yes.
The quality was so overwhelming. These were horses that were out of the art books.
You saw Nazir. How old was he when you saw Nazir?
Well, Nazir was, I guess, probably the first stallion that Marsafi had brought out for us to see. And I will never forget that, he was old. He was 25 years old. He was pure white, and he was wearing a turquoise and white halter. And they brought him out, and at that time they had this big trellis, white trellis, and it was covered with fuchsia bougainville. And they brought that white horse out from under that trellis, and that white against that fuchsia and that turquoise and white halter. I will never forget that picture. It was just something out of a movie. And he was a very attractive horse. I mean, he wasn't wow in comparison to some of the greater stallions that came later, but he had a charisma and an elegance and a nobility that just took your breath away.
Mm. Was Nazir a bigger horse or a taller horse?
He was fairly tall.
Fairly tall?
Tall in the sense that he had a relatively long neck, beautiful big eyes, wonderful eyes. He put wonderful eyes on most of his progeny. He just had a certain look of eagles, I guess you would call it. He was fairly long. He wasn't a short coupled horse. He was sort of medium to long. A good top line, nice chest. But he was old. He had a good depth of girth, a nice shoulder, nice tail carriage. Yeah, he was an elegant horse. And of course, he was of the old Hadban and Zahi strain.
You did not get to see his mother, I doubt.
No, she
must have passed.
Because he was 25.
He was 25.
Yeah.
You were lucky to see him.
And of course, his sire was Mansour, who was. Of course, I didn't see him either, but he was an extremely good sire, and I think it was. He was a sire for Prince Muhammad Ali, and he was also the sire of Rhoda, who was imported to the States. Beautiful, beautiful mare. I think he had a huge influence. Mansour did. And then later on, as we got to understand the breeding better, of course, Sheikh al-Arab was also by Mansour. So we started seeing a doubling of that blood of Nazir on Sheikh al-Arab daughters, which really...
That was the success.
It was a big success.
Yes.
And that was, again, the sire of the grandsire of the dam, which was very interesting.
Yes. That combination.
Yeah.
We'll get to that maybe later on. We have to discuss that.
That's another.
That's another one.
Go on forever.
Yes.
One thing leads into another.